5P with LaMondre is being presented by Ruh Global Impact. Ruh Global Impact is a multifaceted disability inclusion firm. So if you are ready to amplify the impact of your organization's disability inclusion efforts and become a leader of inclusion in your industry, contact Ruh Global Impact at ruhglobal.com. That's RUH Global.com to get started. Each week, 5P with LaMondre will focus on one of the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And this week, we're focusing on goal number 17, partnership, to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Let's go.
Welcome to 5P with LaMondre, the podcast that's all about the 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. If you're looking to be encouraged, inspired, and challenged, then this is the podcast for you. Here's your host, LaMondre.
Today, my first guest in my inaugural interview on 5P with LaMondre is an award-winning CEO of Ruh Global Impact. She's an entrepreneur, an advocate, a mentor, a coach, a speaker, an author, I think, of about 3 different books. But most importantly, she's a mother, a wife, and to me, she has been a great friend. Please welcome Debra Ruh of Ruh Global Impact. Debra, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm
so excited to be on your first show. How exciting is that? Thank you.
Well, I tell you what, I couldn't think of a better guest because, this show is presented by Ruh Global Impact. And I know, and we'll talk more about what Ruh Global Impact is, but I know that helping to create a sustainable development in the world is something that's really important to you as an individual, but it's a part of the mission of Ruh Global Impact. So I couldn't think of a better first guest to have on the show than you. And so thank you for joining us. All right.
You are so welcome. I love the topic. So.
And I tell you what, before we even get into all of that, the first thing I want to do is I want people to know how they can get in contact with you. All right. So I know we've got the website. We've got www.ruhglobal.com, and that's RUH global.com. But your Twitter handle, Facebook page, Instagram, give us that.
It's all the same because I believe in branding. So all of my handles on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of them, Twitter, it is Debra Ruh, DebraRuh. So, and then also you can follow Ruh Global, RUH Global, on many of those platforms. And also you can follow our Chief Sustainability Officer, LaMondre, on those social media platforms too. We believe in being connected.
Absolutely. And it's definitely a connected world that we live in. And so we really want to help to spread this message. So before we go too far, I want people to understand what Ruh Global Impact is. So tell me about your business. What is Ruh Global Impact?
Well, Ruh Global Impact is a marketing and strategy company that focuses on disability inclusion. Now, to focus on disability inclusion, there's a lot of moving parts there. So you really have to think about accessibility, inclusive design, disability employment, disability rights, disability advocacy, disability confidence, as they say in the UK.
Right.
So there's a lot of moving parts. You also have to consider tech for good. How are we using technology to improve people's lives? You have to consider digital inclusion. What does it mean to be digitally inclusion, especially at a time when individuals with disabilities are often not included in so many of those places: education, employment, society as a whole. So Ruh Global Impact is all about having true impact for the community of people with disabilities by making the world work better for everybody.
Right. And I think that is a key differentiating factor, because while we focus on disability inclusion, this is really about making the world a better place for everyone. So when we talk about the name, it says Ruh Global Impact. Why did you put impact in the name?
Well, I will confess that when I made it Ruh Global, it was just going to be a placeholder because you and I had both worked formerly at my old firm,
Right.
Tech Access,
Right.
which was a made-up name. And I thought, well, I know I want to get in and I want to tell the stories and really have impact. So I'll just put global on the end of my last name. Well, that sort of took a life of its own, but we changed the name about not very long ago. As a matter of fact, right around when you joined us, LaMondre, to Ruh Global Impact. And the reason why that name was so important, because I think a lot of us want to have impact. I think millions and millions of people want to have impact. And so making it, just getting it right out there, saying we're here to make the world a better place for everybody. And it seems trite to say that, but we actually can do that. I know you've been doing that for years, which is how I first found out about you, LaMondre, when I was hearing your radio programs in the past.
Right.
So, and then I saw you on stage and you blew me away. And I didn't see at all any disabilities. I saw brilliance and light and somebody that was really in love with life and really wanted to make a difference. I think that's what Ruh Global Impact is all about. How can we sort of bring our best selves to our life?
No, I agree. I agree with that. And I will tell you, that is one of the reasons that I have been so drawn to you, because ever since I met you, your thing has been about making a difference in a big way. You know, it wasn't just about, well, we're just going to, just kind of put this out here and see what happens. No, you put it out there, but you put it out there with a purpose. You put it out there with a mission. You put it out there with a definite end in mind. And that's to make the world a better place, ultimately for everyone, not just for people with disabilities. And so today we're going to focus on Sustainability Development Goal number 17, which is partnership. And the concept behind this goal really is to strengthen the means of implementation, revitalization, or realizing the global partnership for sustainable development. So it's talking about how having those partnerships to move that forward. And as I said in your intro, you are an award-winning CEO. You have a massive following on Twitter and other social media platforms. You are known as an influencer. What role has partnership played in your success?
Well, I think partnership and collaboration has been everything. If you really want to make a difference in the world and you want to change the world in a positive way, the best thing you can do, first of all, is to be grateful. And you and I talk about that all the time. But also not worried about what's coming to you, but how can you help others be successful? Because I've always heard and believed the saying that if you want something, give it to somebody else. So if you want to be prosperous or you want to be successful, help somebody else be prosperous and successful. Right. I also like goal 17 because it ties to 2 of your 5 Ps. It ties to I always take a moment to think about it, LaMondre. So we have people, planet, prosperity for all, I might add. Right. And then of course there's peace and partnership. Perfect. So 17 and really goal 17 and 16, I'm going to look at my cheat sheet, peace and justice, strong institutions. Those 2 go together to focus on peace and partnerships. And also, LaMondre, we are a gig economy, meaning people are working for themselves as subcontractors, starting their own business. Sometimes they're doing it because they have a burning passion like we do, or sometimes they do it because they've been laid off and they don't know where to go, or sometimes you see it quite often in the community of people with disabilities where people start businesses because the workforce doesn't understand the value that they bring. And so I have my whole life been about partnering and collaborating, and at Ruh Global Impact, it's very important to us. We don't need to have a team of, quadrillion people working for us. What we need is we need the best, the talented, and then we need to partner with others that are the best and the most talented as well. So partnerships is everything as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, one of the things that I love about the approach that you're taking, particularly with your business, is really what you are doing is you're making certain that people with disabilities have a seat at that table, that people with disabilities are truly a part of the partnership and not just an afterthought. You know, I start thinking about some of the work you're doing with the Valuable 500, and I want you to tell me a little bit more about that. But when I think about what that actually means and what that does, that really is saying, no, people with disabilities have a seat at the table. And not only are we having a seat at the table, we are partners in this world. We're partners in making the world a better place. So tell me a little bit about the Valuable 500 and what you're doing in terms of pushing that forward.
Well, and I'm also going to tell you something that you didn't ask, but I turned 60 this year. And
Really?
it was, yeah. And what did I do when I would turn 60? I let my hair go gray and then I put a bunch of purple in it. So, but I also looked around at what was happening, and I even had a couple of younger people in their 40s say to me, "We keep waiting for your generation to retire, Debra, and y'all won't retire. So we never get our place on the stage. We never get to have our voices heard." And I was really thinking about that a lot. And I thought, one thing that we all need to do as leaders, and I know you've always done this, LaMondre, which is why I've always been so attracted to your work. We need to make sure it isn't only about us. So when you talk about the Valuable 500, I love Dr. Caroline Casey from Ireland. She is an amazing woman. She is she has a beautiful voice and such light around her. She also came out it's almost about, I think, 10, 15, 20 years ago, as a person that was legally blind. And then you say, what do you mean she came out? Well, she was actually hiding her vision loss. First of all, her parents hid it from her, but not in a mean way. They were just trying to encourage her to not let anything get in her way. So then when she realized, her vision was getting worse, she sort of hid it at work until finally she had no choice but to come out. And I know when we talk about coming out, we usually talk about that from the community of LGBT or something
Right.
like that. But we all can come out. I think we often need to come out. And so, the Valuable 500 was born at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, Davos, Switzerland. And Caroline really felt the CEOs needed to be in the conversations. And she got involved with some really powerful, amazing CEOs, CEO of Unilever, the CEO of Virgin Media, Sir Richard Branson. Paul Pullman was the CEO of Unilever, and others. And she said, the CEOs need to make disability inclusion part of the boardroom agenda, because what we see, we have made amazing strides in the developed countries for including people with disabilities. And yet, people with the more severe disabilities are not being included.
Right.
I look at myself, and we've talked about this before, and I have come out that I'm a human being that have abilities and disabilities. I struggle, especially in the wintertime, with depression, and pretty much it's something that I battle constantly. I also was diagnosed very late in life at 56 years old with ADHD, which made so much sense. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I see community leaders and disability inclusion leaders on the stage talking about their ADHD and their dyslexia and things that really do impact our lives. But what I see is those people were already in the workforce. They were already part of society. Maybe they weren't being accommodated and included, but I often see someone like you, LaMondre, that brings so much to the workforce, not being included because of a lot of different reasons. But I think a lot of it is fear and misunderstanding of what it means to truly include you.
Right. And see, that's the other reason that the 17 goals are important to me, because a part of that is to reduce inequities. A part of that is to, have safe and good work conditions for everyone. So these things are important to me, and as it is you. And what's amazing about your story is you didn't just hear about it or just suffer through it. You chose to do something about it, and that's why you created Tech Access, and then you created Ruh Global Impact. I want you to tell us a little bit of the story about how you became such a fierce entrepreneur.
Well, Of course, it started with my children. So I have two
Usually
grown
does.
children. I know, it really does. I have two grown children, and I had my first child at the age of 28. And she was born with Down syndrome. And I remember when they told us that she had Down syndrome, being just very confused, and I went through a lot of emotions. But I remember thinking, I don't think I've ever met a person with a disability. I do remember going to elementary school and seeing children with disabilities that were in a special class. They never put us together with them. Duh. But what's funny about it is, as I've lived my life, of course, I'm surrounded by people with disabilities, of course, but we don't always allow people, once again, to be their full selves. And so the response that I got from people when they would say, "Oh, you have a baby girl," and I would say, "Yes, she has Down syndrome." Oh, it was an immediate tragic response.
Right.
And I really disliked that, because my daughter's life is not a tragedy. My daughter is cheeky and funny and stubborn, and she thinks she's a princess, and she wants her way, and she's a billion things. She's a musician, she's a dancer, she's an artist. But I didn't want society kept wanting to put her in a box. And I thought, this is ridiculous. And so
Right.
I was in the banking industry, and I thought, whenever she got into middle school, and once again I started hearing everything she couldn't do, it didn't make sense to me, LaMondre. Why can't she join the workforce? Why do we decide when she's in 6th grade that she will never add any value to the workforce? How do you even know that? Have you bothered to talk to her or get to know her? And that's when I started realizing how bad it was, how much we are disenfranchising people with disabilities all over the world. And it's much worse in other countries than it is in the US. But let's not pat ourselves on the back and go, yay, we're done, because we are not done. There is still so much work to be done.
Right. Absolutely, there is. And so, because Sarah, your daughter, was the inspiration for you really starting to look at this, you developed a business that focused on making things accessible, particularly the digital domain, so websites, PDFs, all those kinds of things. But more importantly than that, you hired people with disabilities to work for you. You hired people with disabilities to solve these problems. And so it was from you that I really saw the adage of, when there's an issue, consult the expert. You put that into practice. You are one person that really does walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And it was so funny because you began to experience a lot of success. You began to win CEO awards, and you started seeing real companies make changes because of the work that you do. And you took it a step further, though. Not only did you have this success, but you also began to really advocate in a big way, and you got involved in the UN. Tell me about your involvement with the UN.
Oh, I love the UN. I'm just a nerd fan when it comes to the UN, and I don't think the UN is perfect, because they're made up of human beings, and human beings aren't perfect, but they're trying so hard to make the world a better place for all of us. They really are. And I think sometimes there's a lot of misinformation about the UN as well. But I did get involved, and I've worked with a lot of the UN agencies. One of the greatest things of my life to date, there's been so many, I'm so grateful for my life, but was when the President's Office of the UN asked me to speak before the Committee of State Parties. So
right.
I was so scared.
That's a big deal, Deborah. That's a big deal.
Oh, I was really scared. And I remember getting up there, and I was about to go on stage with a panel, and there were some leaders before me. They were quoting verse and chapter of the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I thought, I don't have it memorized. I can't. And I thought, stop it. Let the universe, I'm very spiritual, let God flow through you. And so I did. I just went up there and spoke authentically. And I said, we can all do better as countries. We can make sure that you don't give grants out or you don't give out proposals unless they are committing to include people with disabilities in every aspect of it, from the education to employment. We have more strength together than we realize. And it was just so powerful. It was a beautiful experience. And I also worked with UNICEF and created their accessibility guidelines and statements and training for them. And we've worked with the International Labor Organization, of the ILO Global Business Disability Network, helping them bring U.S. corporations into the global conversations. And I've worked with UNESCO and many other UN agencies, and and others like the World Bank that aren't a UN agency, but they're always collaborating with them. So doing a lot of collaborations that way, including, like you said, the Valuable 500, which is it is not a UN effort, but the UN, like the ILO, has said, we believe in this. If you're a CEO of a corporation, you have 1,000 employees or more, you are a corporation, and the CEO will sign it and commit to including people with disability in the boardroom agenda, and it's free. There's no money to charge. Those kind of things we get behind because it goes back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are goals that we have decided as a world will make the world a better place for everyone. I mean, really, it's got to be everybody. It can't just be the white people. I'm Caucasian. It has to be, or it can't just be the developed countries. Right. It's got to be everybody.
Right. And see, I believe that that's why your story is so important, because not only are we talking about it from a corporate perspective, a small business perspective, but then we're also dealing with large multinational organizations. Then we're dealing with government association, the educational institutions and financial institutions. So really what you do and the way that you've structured the work that you do, it really touches every aspect of life, because in order for us to achieve these 17 goals, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us. The government can't do it alone. Private industry can't do it alone. Small businesses can't do it alone. And individuals can't do it alone. So it takes all of us to do that. And that's exactly how you've structured it. And so that leads me to my next question. Why is sustainability so important to you?
Well, I also have a show called Human Potential at Work, and we recently did an episode where we were talking about climate action, climate change, and while in technology changing so quickly, technology continues to double every 2 years, according to Moore's law, and it was supposed to stop after 10 years. It hasn't. It continues to double. And that's wonderful and exhausting and intense and a lot of other things. But what we were seeing was, while we're breaking everything up, disrupting everything, throwing all the alligators out, as some people say, cleaning out the swamps, while we're disrupting everything to try to hunker down and do the right thing by our world, this is a good opportunity to make sure that people with disabilities and other disenfranchised groups are more meaningfully included. This is the time to look at not only what are we doing individually to protect our earth and make sure that other people's lives matter. I know that I was one of those Americans that was surprised by the election. And I also was very surprised when I started seeing all of, everything that was happening to African Americans in the United States, the Black Lives Matter. I was, right. And I even had a conversation, LaMondre, with a very lovely woman that I met, and she was African American, around my age. And we compared notes about when my son was learning to drive at 16 versus her sons were learning to drive at 16. And she told me just a small little thing that still chilled me as an individual, as a very proud American. When I was teaching my son to drive, I harassed him about driving. He got sick of driving because I wanted him. I knew the one way I could try to protect him was giving him experience behind the wheel. And so when I told him, don't be stupid, don't have drugs in your car, blah, 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 all these different things. But then I talked about this woman who is an African American, and she said, well, they did all those things too, but they also took a few other steps. For example, they got a wallet that was double-sided and it had room for 2 IDs. And they had her husband said, here is your driver's license, but put your student ID next to it. So if a police officer stops you, open it up and they'll be able to see your student. And so they had to go to extra steps to assure he was one of the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
See, I didn't know still how bad it was for my fellow Americans. And that's just one little thing. But how can we think about, making sure the world is sustainable when it's not sustainable for everybody? LaMondre.
Right. And, when I said wow, the wow wasn't because they did that. The wow was because from my community, there's always extra precautions you take in order to assure that you can get home. Okay. And it's amazing because
and I didn't know that.
It's amazing.
I didn't know it though, LaMondre.
Yeah. And it's amazing because I growing up, there was, I know people who there was just an inherent fear of law enforcement. You didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing that you did, but there's it's like a fist in the pit of your stomach when law enforcement becomes involved. Now, I've seen other friends, from that may be Caucasian or what have you. They'll just, no problem. Hey, officer, how's it going? What's going on? But the reaction in my community was usually a reaction that this interaction may not be good. And nobody did anything wrong. Now, I have friends who were in law enforcement and they were great. My friends who were in law enforcement, they were wonderful. But that was not the general perception of law enforcement. And that's because of all the things that have happened and that still happen. And where is the justice? And so that and like, as I said, the reason that I said wow was because it was, that's what we do. That's what we do.
I just never knew that. And sometimes you don't know stuff until you know it. And our work at Ruh Global Impact is all about really trying to break down those unconscious biases that we all have. And sometimes it's that we just didn't know. I had no idea that my friends were walking that. It was sad for me to learn it. And, sustainability, it impacts everything we do. We need to be sustainable. We need any projects that are really going to improve people's lives to be sustainable. We need to deal with, there are 5 generations in the workforce right now. We've never had that before. 5 generations.
Right.
And then I already mentioned the gig economy. Then we have this artificial intelligence and all that stuff happening. And there's fears artificial intelligence will take away jobs for disenfranchised populations like the community of people with disabilities. And the AI is going to turn on us and, all those sci-fi fantasies that we have of the future. But is sustainability to me and the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, they just made so much sense to the work we were already doing. How do we make sure we have tech for good? How do we make sure we are considering all intersectionalities of being a human being? How do we make sure that, like you said, LaMondre, the way I figured, if we're going to do this, what the heck, let's do it really big. So let's work with governments. We've worked with Egypt, we've worked with Oman, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Latin America, Africa, Asia's. We've worked with so many governments and so many multinationals and universities. And it is sort of amazing who we've gotten to work with. But the reality is, and we say this, you and I are both saying this a lot, if you are a major corporation, I don't care if you're a national corporation or a multinational or a local corporation, and you are not giving back to your community, local, national, and globally, you're not giving back and you're not allowing your employees to participate and give back, shame on you. Because the younger people thank goodness for the younger people. They're saying, I'm not going to work for you. I saw the way you treated my parents. I'm out of here. You had 1,500 people walk out on Google a few months ago because the way a sexual abuse case was being handled.
Mm-hmm.
You have employees walking out on Uber and Lyft, and the younger people are striking. Greta Thunberg is, a young lady herself with autism who has been trolled and bullied because she has autism. And she said the other day, I was so proud of this young woman. She said, having autism or Asperger's is my superpower.
Right.
You can try to make fun of me about it, but this is my superpower. Get out of the way while I go make the world a better place.
I love the way she characterized that, because that opens up a sense of empowerment for so many other people who felt that their situation was one that was debilitating or one that limited them in some way, shape, or form. And the truth is, it is simply a part of diversity. It is simply a part of what makes them who they are. So I cheered when I heard her say that it was her superpower. And,
me too.
And this, speaking of superpowers, I believe that we are the heroes. And when I say we, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about the person listening to this podcast right now. You are the hero. But in order to really make an impact, in order to really make a difference, that means that you must do your individual part to change your corner of the world. These goals, these 17 goals are huge, but I believe that they're attainable. I believe that we can do it. And how do we do it? We do it by the aggregate efforts of all of us. So, Debra, what can someone do to implement moving these goals forward, moving this agenda forward in their daily lives, whether it be in their business or in their personal lives or in their advocacy? What are some of the tips that you have for people who really want to make an impact?
Well, there's so many great tips, but I would say just a few. Speak up for others. Speak up for others, even if you don't speak in a traditional manner, like Rosemary Musashio, our Chief Accessibility Officer. She uses augmented communications, but let me tell you, she got something to say. She's brilliant. And so whatever your way is, make sure that others are being empowered and included. And for example, I was invited to speak at an event in New York City, and I was listening to what they were saying, and I thought, it shouldn't be me, it should be LaMondre speaking. And in the first place, because you have an amazing voice, you have a lot to say,
Thank you.
But we still see people with more severe disabilities being left off the stage. And I just can't do that anymore. And so there are so many ways that we can move forward with the sustainable development goals in small ways. We can do better about recycling. We can educate ourselves about recycling. We can eat lower on the food chain when that makes sense for your health. We can conserve water. We can take care of our neighbors. By the way, the stuff we're probably all doing already, but we can amp it up a little bit more. If you work for a corporation, no matter how big or small, or an education or an organization, make sure that they are walking the walk. Or what are they doing to make sure we're including everybody, we're empowering people, we're recycling, it really discourages me when I go. My daughter recently, for about a year, she was extremely, extremely sick, and she was in the hospital, and it bummed me out that they weren't recycling in the hospital. So I would not. And it's small things, but I just couldn't throw the glass bottles away, and we can use less plastic. There's so many things that we can do that add up to the sustainable development goals, including encouraging your employers, or if you yourself are an entrepreneur, to really learn what these are, listen to your show, educate yourself, and make a commitment to make the world a better place. There's such small things that you can do that start to really add up.
Yeah. Well, Debra, I thank you for the opportunities that you've presented to me, and I'm so glad that is your position, that you've taken that, because not everybody would have the responsibility or even the ability to consider other people, to look at other people and say, you know what, this is a great opportunity for me, but this will be a fabulous opportunity to move the agenda forward, to give someone else that platform. And that's what true partnership is about. So I'm glad we've had the opportunity to talk about Sustainable Development Goal number 17, partnership. And I'm thankful that you are doing your part to make that happen. Your book is called Inclusion Branding. You can pick it up at Amazon and other booksellers. And it's an amazing book. Anyone who is really looking at how to develop an inclusion strategy for your business, this is the book for you. Debra really wrote the book on it. And more importantly, I thank you, Debra, for being my purple-haired friend.
Yes, thank you, LaMondre, for your voice and wisdom. I am just so grateful to learn from you and to make sure that people can hear your voice. I'm very proud of that.
Thank you so much. Again, you can reach Debra at her Twitter handle and at Facebook and on LinkedIn. What is it again, Debra?
It's my name, Debra Ruh, Debraruh.
Reach out to her. She's got some incredible insights and wisdom to share with you. Debra, thank you again. Keep going out there and changing the world with partnerships and with making certain that people with disabilities have a voice and have a seat at the table. Because honestly, you can be out there crying all day long, but if you're not seated at the table, chances are you're not going to eat. So Debra, thank you for making sure that everyone has a chance to eat.
Well said. Thank you, LaMondre.
Debra is doing amazing work and having a global impact. So she's being true to her name. But what I really love about Debra's story is that she's an ordinary woman using her skills, her talents, her intelligence, and her insights to move her agenda forward, to move the thing that she cares about forward. In other words, she's doing her part. And that's what this show is really about. It's about people doing their part to change the world. In each episode, we're going to focus on one of the SDGs, and we're going to meet people who are doing their part in impacting that particular goal. Now, for example, in an upcoming episode, we will be focusing on goal number 2, zero hunger. And I'll be speaking with an urban farmer who is doing his part to eradicate food deserts in his community. Now, he's not feeding the world, but he's doing his part to change his corner of the world. And in another episode, we'll be focusing on goal number 10, to reduce inequality. And I'll be interviewing an HR professional who is creating cutting-edge technology to significantly reduce biases in the hiring process. Again, this is someone who is doing their part and having an impact in their corner of the world. See, this is not about one individual moving mountains, but it is about that individual doing their part to make certain that that mountain is not a barrier to progress. And that's what this show is really about. It's about helping you realize that you're that individual, you're that person, that you can truly do, as Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. My goal and my hope is that this show encourages you, that it inspires you, that it challenges you to do just that. Be the change. Be the change. If you would, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast. I want your feedback. I want to know what you think. And in the meantime, I want you to remember that I am LaMondre Pough, reminding you that today is the perfect day to begin being the change you want to see. Live big, live full, live authentic. In each episode, we're going to focus on one of the SDGs, and we're going to meet people who are doing their part in impacting that particular goal. Now, for example, in an upcoming episode, we will be focusing on goal number 2, zero hunger. And I'll be speaking with an urban farmer who is doing his part to eradicate food deserts in his community. Now, he's not feeding the world, but he's doing his part to change his corner of the world. And in another episode, we'll be focusing on goal number 10, to reduce inequality. And I'll be interviewing an HR professional who is creating cutting-edge technology to significantly reduce biases in the hiring process. Again, this is someone who is doing their part and having an impact in their corner of the world. See, this is not about one individual moving mountains, but it is about that individual doing their part to make certain that that mountain is not a barrier to progress. And that's what this show is really about. It's about helping you realize that you're that individual, you're that person, that you can truly do, as Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. My goal and my hope is that this show encourages you, that it inspires you, that it challenges you to do just that. Be the change. Be the change. If you would, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast. I want your feedback. I want to know what you think. And in the meantime, I want you to remember that I am LaMondre Pough, reminding you that today is the perfect day to begin being the change you want to see. Live big, live full, live authentic.